Xtalks is the industry leader in connecting life science, food, healthcare, and medical device professionals. The Xtalks Life Science podcast features insightful conversations with industry experts about all things pharma, biotech, and more.
Hello and welcome to the Xtalks Life Science Podcast. My name is Ayesha, Senior Life Science Journalist at Xtalks.com. And this week, I'm happy to introduce a very special guest on the show. We have with us today Marci English, Vice President and Head of BioPharma Development at Astellas Pharma. In May 2023, which is just over a year ago, the company received a very landmark approval, FDA approval for Fezolinetant, or Veozah, for the treatment of moderate to severe vasomotor symptoms due to menopause. Veozah is the first non-hormonal neurokinin 3 or NK3 receptor antagonist approved to treat vasomotor symptoms associated with menopause, which include hot flashes and night sweats. To learn more about the work Marci is leading at Astellas and the latest on Fezolinetant 1 year later, including its reception from healthcare providers and patients alike, let's turn to Marci now. Thank you so much for being on the show, Marci.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Marci, I'd like to start off. We had a conversation actually over a year ago when Fezolinetant was approved or was on its way to FDA approval. And so I'd like to ask, since the drug has marked over a year now since its approval, can you tell us about the impact of Veozah on the treatment landscape for menopause?
Absolutely. I am always excited to talk about Veozah. And you're correct. In May of 2024, that marked 1 full year since the U.S. FDA approval of Veozah, which is the first and only hormone-free treatment designed to directly block the source of vasomotor symptoms, or what we commonly talk about as hot flashes and night sweats. Since that approval over the last year, many women have been treated with this first-in-class treatment, and we're proud of what we've achieved to date. Setting the stage, most women experience menopause, and nearly half of the women in the United States who are going through menopause are experiencing vasomotor symptoms or hot flashes that are moderate to severe. It's a great impact, a great burden on a woman's life. And despite this burden, despite the prevalence of vasomotor symptoms, for many years there were just limited treatment options, and certainly limited hormone-free treatment options. So there's a big unmet need here. And we're really proud at Astellas to have brought Veozah to market to fulfill that need.
And what differentiates Veozah from other drugs on the market? Of course, we know that it's the first non-hormonal treatment for menopause. And so could you talk a little bit about the mechanism of action and the specifics behind how the drug works?
Yeah. So for years, we talk about hot flashes and night sweats, right? And for years, people thought that it was solely because women were losing estrogen as they age. But it actually is much more complicated than that. What recent, and I say recent meaning the last decade or so, research understood was that it was actually a very complex interplay that occurs in the hypothalamus of our brain. So when women start to go through menopause, estrogen declines. And in the hypothalamus, which is the temperature control center of the body, there is a neuron called the KND neuron. And on this neuron, there are receptors. There are receptors for estrogen, and there are receptors for a compound called neurokinin B. What hormone therapy does is come in and replace the estrogen. What Fezolinetant or Veozah does is, instead of really worrying about what's happening with estrogen, we block the receptor that neurokinin B binds to. And what this does is, you can think about these two receptors as kind of like a push and pull or a seesaw. And so when you lose all that estrogen, the activity on that neurokinin 3 receptor goes up. And so what fezolinetant does is it blocks that receptor and kind of gets back to that homeostasis, rebalancing that temperature control center. So it's a really novel mechanism of action, and one that we showed in our phase 3 program was very effective.
Thank you so much for that overview. And I think it's really important that we essentially have a targeted therapy here for treating the symptoms of menopause, which again, like this is truly groundbreaking because it's never been done before. And hopefully hopefully Fezolinetant and Astellas paves the way for future next generation therapies and more from Astellas as well. So this is very, very exciting indeed. And so I'd like to know what the reception to Fezolinetant has been among both healthcare providers as well as patients.
Well, certainly we are trying to understand the perceptions of both patients and healthcare providers actively. We are continually hearing feedback, continually listening to them so that we can improve in any way possible on what we've built over the last year. Overall, what we can say is that the feedback has been incredibly positive from patients and from providers. Overall, we are very committed to ensuring that Veozah is accessible. Speaking for members in our commercial organization who have done, we are always doing, as I said, commercial research and research with patients to understand the next steps for our products. They've done market research, and it shows that 76% of healthcare providers are reporting that they are extremely willing to prescribe Veozah, and that healthcare providers who have prescribed this to their patients are providing very positive reactions. So over time, Astellas, we're confident we're going to see that same response, and that it's only going to grow. But I think, we talk about prescribing, we talk about, patients wanting a therapy. What's also important is access. So we're pleased that, we had a goal of 50% payer coverage in the US by the end of March of this year. And we achieved that goal. But we're not stopping at 50% because that's not good enough. By the end of March of 2025, we're hoping to secure 80% payer coverage in the United States. And what we're also doing in parallel is continuing to educate physicians on this widening accessibility to ensure that they realize that their patients can access this very important medication.
And as part of those efforts to increase uptake and coverage, so what kinds of continued education efforts and support programs are you engaged in for Fezolinetant? And how do you work to raise awareness and educate both healthcare providers and patients about new treatment options, and of course, which includes Fezolinetant?
Yeah, we're first in class. And for a long time, people were under the impression that, back when WHI released all that data on hormone therapy, I think a lot of physicians and certainly a lot of patients just gave up on the idea of treating hot flashes. So one of our responsibilities, one of our goals at this point is to make sure that we are working with stakeholders across the health system, but specifically providers, specifically payers, to make sure that they understand the value of Veozah and the unmet need it addresses for women living with vasomotor symptoms associated with menopause. It's an area that's been long ignored, and one of the critical things for us is to use the data we have generated to support those educational activities. Another priority, I mentioned women, I mentioned the patients, is continuing to drive that awareness of Veozah through direct-to-consumer initiatives. And as you know, we had a DTC campaign, TV spot. It was called, or is called, Fewer Hot Flashes, More Not Flashes, which I just love. We aired a spot during the 2024 Super Bowl that just received amazing feedback. And that particular piece of DTC has been on the market since fall of 2023. And again, we don't stop there. So we're executing a multi-platform social media strategy as well. So leveraging the ability to generate content across TikTok and Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest. It's important too. I think, we think about those platforms. They skew towards a younger demographic in some cases. We feel like this is a moment, right? So, we're also just trying to educate everyone about menopause. It's not just about targeting midlife women. It's about elevating a conversation across generations. More recently, and one thing I think we're really excited about is Gloria Rubin, who many people know from the show ER. She is an Emmy and Golden Globe nominated actress. She is working with Astellas to share her experience with moderate to severe vasomotor symptoms and how Veozah helped her manage her VMS. And one of her goals, I know in the conversations Astellas has had with her, is again elevating that conversation about hot flashes and night sweats and how they impact women's lives. It's about sparking meaningful conversations that help drive change, drive awareness, and that also it's creating that awareness that you don't have to have as many interruptions from moderate to severe VMS due to menopause. You have some options now available that you can speak with your healthcare provider about.
That is so wonderful to hear. And that's such an important message, that it's so important to raise awareness at a societal level, and not just, for the niche that is affected by menopause, or, it really is a broader campaign, and it's something that should be universally known, from young women to older women to men too. Like, I think everybody just needs to be on board, right? To know what women are going through and what treatment options are out there and what Fezolinetant can do for women. So I think that's fantastic. And then, of course, engaging audiences on different platforms is kind of the call of the day, from social media, TikTok, and all of that. So that's fantastic. And I did catch the ad. I actually covered some Super Bowl ads here at Xtalks, and Astellas Fezolinetant was right there, and I thought that was fantastic.
We were all so proud. We were just so proud of that spot, because I think it spoke, think about after we did the Super Bowl ad, it was the phenomenal feedback we got. And it wasn't just from midlife women. It was from partners who were like, my spouse suffers from this, my partner suffers from this. We heard, in social media, younger generations saying, my mom is experiencing this. It's really started. Menopause is having a moment right now. And I think we need to embrace that and just keep driving it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like these stories, this condition, it affects people, family, friends, caregivers. And it's just, again, the conversations have not been had, and finally they are being had, which is phenomenal. So thank you to Astellas, really, and the work that you do there, that you're leading, because bringing so menopause mainstream. Yeah. Absolutely. And so, speaking about all of the wonderful positive feedback that you've received from campaigns and just the overall reception of Fezolinetant, how does that all play into the design and execution of clinical trials for women's health in general? I think it speaks to the broader question maybe of perhaps in the past, those patient-specific feedback, areas, and that wasn't really maybe 10, 20 years ago, wasn't really as much of a focus as it is today. So I'd like to know how Astellas approaches that in terms of incorporating patient feedback into the design of its studies and even drug development moving forward.
I love this question because I know how difficult it was, maybe even in the beginning when we started our Veozah trials. People were very reluctant to talk about menopause, and there's just this kind of a stigma around it. And what I have seen over the last 4 to 5 years working on this program, going out, speaking to physicians, speaking to patients, is that because we've done this research, because we did this clinical program, it's actually made people more comfortable to talk about the importance of researching the very unique aspects of women's health. So I go to conferences, you are constantly being approached by physicians who are saying, we need to focus on this, or this is different for women, or we're estimating the impact of whatever we're speaking about in women. So I think, being on the forefront and doing this woman-centric development program, my hope is that it's going to continue to push for additional research into those unique aspects of women's health. I know we're already seeing an effect of that. There's loads of literature that talk about, they examine clinical trials over the last, 50 years and how women are just woefully underrepresented in clinical studies. I think there's an acknowledgement that there are very unique aspects to women's health now, and specific nuances that deserve additional study. And I think what we're seeing is an emphasis, an emphasis at, certainly the government level. Recently, we saw, the legislation that went through Congress talking about increasing investment in menopause and women's health and why this is incredibly important. I myself have gone up to the Hill and talked to legislators who are now as well aware that this needs to be focused on. Speaking about Astellas itself, we always go where the patient need is. And we're so proud to be the leaders in this space. We'll continue to look for opportunities to support the health of women. I've said this before publicly, but it's really not just about women's health. It's about the health of society. So because women we are a vast proportion of society, why wouldn't we focus on the health of women in order to make sure our entire population was as healthy as possible? So it's an opportunity, and I think we're going to see more investment.
I just can't stop nodding my head. It's it's like, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely does feel like a triumphant moment. And so thank you so much for sharing all of those insights. And I know that speaking about some recent phase 3 study data, I know that Astellas recently shared some of that at a recent conference, the International Society of Gynecological Endocrinology World Congress, which took place last month. So could you tell us a bit more about that data? Because it doesn't just end here. It's, of course, the ongoing studies that you have. So I'd like to, learn from you more about what the latest data is.
Sure. Yeah. We presented at ISGE in May, and the data that we presented there, we have an incredibly rich data set. So from our phase 3 trials, you obviously have to show the agencies, you have to show the regulators, that you've achieved the a priori defined endpoints that are necessary for registration. But we collect so much data in these trials. And again, it's to show where we're creating value for patients and for providers and for the healthcare system. So the data at ISGE was really focused on the data we collected in 2 of our phase 3 pivotal studies, Skylight 1 and Skylight 2. Specifically, we looked at the proportion of women in those studies that were on concomitantly with their treatment with Fezolinetant or Veozah in the trials, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which are known as SSRIs, and serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, which are known as SNRIs. And that data showed that we saw just as good of an effect in those patients in reducing their hot flashes as we did in the general population. So understanding unique subpopulations and making sure that we are seeing the same effect and the same safety profile in those subpopulations is incredibly important. And really right now we're driving to get that data out, and we'll continue to see more data come out at subsequent congresses.
Wonderful. And so what's next for Veozah? What can we expect to see and hear in the coming months and years?
Yeah. So we're obviously, I just said we're going to push a lot of data out, which is true. We're going to keep pursuing publication. We just have so much information to share with the scientific community that will further establish, Veozah as this first-in-class novel mechanism of action agent to help women with hot flashes and night sweats. We will be seeing that at upcoming congresses. Some sleep disturbance data and sleep impairment data was recently published. We'll talk more about that at subsequent congresses. I think the thing, though, that I'm most excited to talk about is something that we wanted to do for a very long time in our program, and we're finally able to do that now, which is start a study, a phase 3 study, looking at women who had breast cancer but are now on adjuvant endocrine therapy. This is one of the most high unmet needs for women. Adjuvant endocrine therapy, tamoxifen and aromatase inhibitors are taken by 80% of women who have hormone receptor positive breast cancer. And what those agents do is stop either the synthesis of endogenous estrogen from your fatty tissues, or it blocks the estrogen receptor. It does that because estrogen feeds HR receptor positive tumors. But what it does is it forces women into premature menopause, or it's one piece that forces women into premature menopause when you look at the continuum of breast cancer therapy. These patients tend to be younger, and they enter menopause very quickly, and it's incredibly severe for them meaning their hot flash experience, just to be clear. So when you do that, it's very similar to what you would see in a menopause patient where estrogen declines and they get hot flashes. Here, they're blocking estrogen or preventing synthesis, and maybe they've gone through surgical menopause, but they end up having really intense hot flashes and night sweats. And there's nothing that they can really take because they can't take hormone therapy. That's not an option for them because their tumors are hormone receptor positive. So Veozah or non-hormonal treatments, this presents such an amazing opportunity to potentially fulfill an unmet need. We are starting our phase 3 clinical trial in the second quarter of this fiscal year. So excited about this potential promising therapy for these women who really have no other choices. So just something we're super excited about.
Wow, indeed. That is definitely something to be excited about, to explore it in such an important indication. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And we look forward to seeing what's ahead on that end for sure. So, Marci, I just wanted to ask, as a leader in biopharma development and just all of the fantastic work that you've led with Veozah, what is your vision really for the future of women's health clinical research, given all of the learnings and all of the processes that you've been through with Veozah. So what do you envision? How have things changed, and how do you see things changing and evolving in this space over the next 5 to 10 years?
So we kind of skirted around this issue a little bit in our chats. I do, I always remember this particular piece of data, which I think is so important, which is that there are so few medical schools that have menopause on their curriculum. There are so few providers that specialize in menopause therapy. You asked me what the change was that I've seen in the last several years. I think that's one of the big changes we've seen. What that's going to do is it's going to also increase the amount of research that gets done. It's going to increase the amount of attention. As Astellas with Veozah, it's been amazing to be on the forefront of change for women. What a wonderful opportunity to know that you're impacting women's lives, and actually many other, we talked about, families and spouses and partners, impacting their lives as well. It's an amazing place to be. We'll continue, just like we talked about all of our other therapeutic areas. Astellas goes where there's unmet need, and there's unmet need in women's health. We're going to chase that breast cancer study. We are going to, because we know how important it potentially can be for women, we're always going to go where the unmet need is. And we look forward to continuing to advocate, continuing to talk about menopause, decrease the stigma. That's only going to change, again, how we think about women's health, and how we can learn more about the experience of being a woman and their unique health needs. So we go where the unmet needs are, and I think women's health is one of those opportune areas.
Absolutely. And Marci, once again, thank you so much for sharing the work that you've led with Veozah and just everything that you've done at Astellas and in moving women's health forward. You truly are a leader in the space. So we really thank you for your work. And I thank you for your time to share those insights and being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
That's the end of this episode of the Xtalks Life Science Podcast. If you liked today's show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you next time. Bye for now.
To join the Xtalks community, visit xtalks.com and register for exclusive access to curated content like live webinars, news articles, and educational videos. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the speakers sharing them and should not be taken as professional advice, nor do they necessarily reflect the policy or position of Honeycomb Worldwide. For further information, email us at podcast@xtalks.com.